Buongiorno a tutti. Come avete visto abbiamo...
Good morning to you all. As you can see, there are 5 guests, so I suggest we start right away. The song you heard has something to do with the book we will talk about today as well. The title of today's session is "The last word is never the word end, but the word good." These are the words which are at the end of the book L'Arco di Luce, this arch of light. There are some words of Léon Blois which are very important to me because they explain why I decided to organize this event during this meeting, which is entitled "What is this lack of, O heart, of which all of a sudden you are full?" In 1973, Léon Blois wrote that some people tend to think that love can always only be for some people who are isolated, and I believe this is not true. The opposite is exactly true. We should be able to write a book to show this truth, which is very important. We have to suffer to be able to love. Love is always present because in our hearts we all have some corners which we still haven't discovered and which are fundamental for our experience. And I believe we now have this very important book, which is both for children and for adults. It is called L'Arco di Luce, the Arch of Light. So if it is true that everything that happens to us provokes us, so to speak, it is also true that there are things which make us wonder. The story of Giovanna is a very good example of this, but I believe every one of you has experienced something similar and it could share it. I have been working as a doctor with patients affected by leukemia for 40 years, and I can definitely say that this desire of the heart when faced with disease or with suffering in general is the desire to be fulfilled and to find happiness. I will introduce Giovanna, but in my opinion, the most important thing to do is meeting Giovanna, maybe also through the book that you can also buy here at the meeting. And I met Giovanna in the 90s when her husband, on the 27th of November 1998, was killed by a robber. She had started her journey with the Brotherhood of St. Joseph. From the very beginning, she was a very special friend because she was always very down to earth. She always made me think about what was happening, and she made me think about the essence of what I was experiencing. And so she really helped me understand what was happening around me. She helped me understand the very essence of life. She made me want to go beyond the surface. And so one night, we were at her place, and she was holding her youngest kid. She had 6 children, aged from 1 to 17 years old. And she had written a story to explain her child why his father was no longer there. The book was published in 1994. And I often photocopied the book for my patients when a father or a mother died and left young children behind. Of course, this is always a very tragic situation. In 2009, more than 10 years after, she called me and she told me that she was feeling pain, and she asked me to do something about it. The first thing that came to mind was to call a specialist. However, I decided to tell her to come visit me anyway after I finished working. And I suddenly realized that it was no nerve pain, that what she was feeling was something much worse. And so I was very sad because I realized she was being put through an even more terrible situation by God. However, she never stopped trusting me and trusting people and finding in these relationships an answer, as we have discovered here at the meeting, following the example of Abraham. Our experience became more intense every day, and now Giovanna is at home surrounded by her children, her nephews, and many friends who are happy to be around her, who need her. She can only move the eye muscles and smile or cry, and everything else is left to those who are around her. They have to understand that she needs to move an arm or a leg, but the most difficult thing she has to do is to be able to say yes to those who are calling her. She's not able to do this. So she was put through a very difficult situation because of the death of her husband and her illness. And so I wanted this book to be republished by the NeMo Medical Center. And that's why I asked Mr. Melazzini to help me, because I believe this book can be very helpful to the patients and to the relatives of patients. I have been working for 40 years with patients affected by leukemia, and I know that when you are sick, there's a question you never stop asking yourself, that is, what is the meaning behind all you're experiencing? Why is this happening to me, is what patients ask themselves. They also feel that lack inside their hearts. We've been talking about at the meeting. And so in order for us to be able to grow and to find an answer, no treatment is enough. We need something else. So I would like to thank Mario for republishing the book within the NeMo Center. And I would also like to thank Mr. Orsi and Marie-Michel Bolse for her illustrations. And I would also like to thank Giovanna for what she added to that story she wrote in the book. And of course, this was a very hard endeavor, because she had to find help to write that part of the book. So this story is a way of giving back a father to her children. And I believe every one of us needs to find their direction. And this is why I would like to ask Professor Rodolfo Balzarotti to make a few remarks. He's a very good friend of Giovanna. He's also the research director of the William Congdon Foundation. And so I would like to ask him to tell us something more about this book, about this story, which is a sort of a fairy tale. And I would like to ask all of you to think about your own experience and to think about what your experience has in common with Giovanna's experience. And I'll give the floor to Mr. Balzarotti.
Grazie.
Thank you. I am here because the protagonists of today's talk are the people who experience the disease themselves because they've got the disease or because they are taking care of a patient or of a dear person. And so I'm here as a friend of Giovanna's. I'd like to give you an idea of what Giovanna wanted to tell us through this fairy tale. So this is the title of our talk. The last word is never the word end, but the word good experiences disease. This is the last page of her book. This is the cover of the book. As Paola said, this book was created at the last meeting, so it's a real miracle that it spread all around and many people bought it. It is a fairy tale for children and a story for adults. First of all, I'd like to tell you about the way she reacted to two tragic events in her life with a very creative response, writing the fairy tale. These two events marked her life in a very tragic way, but only by gratefulness such a gesture, such an expressive gesture can be born. And by spending a few hours with her, and seeing how ill she was, I myself started to experiment something very weird, as if and when I came back home, I felt as if I had healed from my disease. But what kind of disease? Pope John Paul II said that he felt freed, healed from that sick anxiety, namely that way of experiencing lack, the way of looking at this lack and understanding what this lack stands for. And so we're talking about a fairy tale, the story of a prince finding his wife, a princess, Jutinai, the name of the prince, and Juno, the name of his wife. And the first letters of the names refer to the people of the family. Lutinai means Ludovico, her husband who died many years ago, and Gino, Giovanna, obviously. But in order to understand this fairy tale, it is important to look at the new illustrations realized by Marie-Michel Ponchet, because she picked a few passages to illustrate, and in doing so, she helps us understand the sense of this fairy tale. She helps us understand the music of this fairy tale. It is not a classical illustration, but it's not just an experiment of colors and shapes. But now we are moving to the illustration number 2, representing the moment when they meet each other, the prince and the princess. And there is a title to this image saying, "My name is Gineron," said the young girl, meaning flower of winter. And so we can see that there's a set of shapes, quite a squared image, bluish, which can refer to male figures, quite squared, and among them we can see on the right a female shape of a pink-yellow color, just like a window from which a light comes, and so flower of winter, and we can even nearly smell the smell of this flower. This is the illustration number 4, representing the banquet and the celebrations of the wedding. And this is illustration number 6, referring to a very special episode. The prince and the princess have got married. They had their first child. They will have 6 children, just like Giovanna's children. Everything is okay. But one day, when traveling around his kingdom, Giutinine finds a place which he did not know. So, by a river, and on the other shore, he sees a mysterious world. Okay, so this is what I summed up for you. In this enchanted place, there was a weird peace which the prince had never experienced. He could not see not houses nor men. He could barely see the other shore, with a light fog, and he could see the image of a land which attracted him. And so he wondered how it was possible that on the other shore there was such a place and that he never knew about it. He looked around in order to look for a bridge in order to reach the other shore, but there was nothing, and the water was too deep in order to go through the river. And so he came back to his palace. This episode is very important. Why is it important? It is important because Utinai discovers an unknown area of his kingdom. And so, this is to say that inside ourselves there is something which we do not know, something we do not possess, so we're not the owners at our own place. And so, it is very interesting to see that in the peak of happiness, before the drama takes place, there is this kind of image looking over a mystery. And so this episode represents the following drama of the story. This helps us interpret the dramas that will take place, because on the shore of that river, the protagonist will understand his mission and his vocation, and we will find out what the light arc stands for. But I'm not going to say anything else because maybe you want to read the book. This is the last illustration I'd like to comment. Illustration number 8. This is very different color-wise compared to the previous ones. There are more neutral colors and very harsh shapes representing human shapes. Gino is sick and she suffers from a mysterious disease. Her life is coming to an end. And I quote, "Her heart had become of ice, and nothing could break this ice, the shell of her heart. Nearly 20 years before that, just like in this fairy tale, Giovanna had prophetically announced her illness, her disease. I was also impressed by the fact that she imagines that this disease not only affects her body but all of the kingdom. So the heart of people is sort of switching off. And so I'd like to make a digression, which is not a digression actually, because it is worth noticing that Giovanna used a great topic of the Occidental narrative, which we inherited from the Middle Ages, a sort of archetype, as experts defined it, which is the legend of the fisherman, which entered the Parsifal circle. There are a lot of versions of this story, but I'd like to quote it here, reading the comment by Mircea, great religious expert, who said that we're talking about a detail of the legend of Parsifal and the king fisherman. And the old king who possessed the secret of this sacred graal was paralyzed by a mysterious disease. He was not the only one suffering. All of his kingdom and the animals and the towers, the palace, the gardens and the trees, the rivers, everything was turning off, and he could not recover from this disease. Just one night, poor night, an unknown night, he went up to the king, and out of the blue he asked for the Graal, and everything transformed. The kingdom gets zapped from his bed, and the water starts flowing again, and his kingdom comes back to life. And so these few words were enough in order to revive nature as a whole. However, those words represented the core of the question: where is the sacred, the center of life, the source of immortality? Where was the Graal? And this small detail of a great European myth shows us a side which was ignored about the symbolism of the center. Not only does exist the solidarity between the universal life and the salvation of man, but we must always think of salvation, we must always think of the central problem, which is the problem, because cosmic life only in this way can be revived. And so, as I said at the beginning, there is a way of experiencing this lack, which is ignoring this lack, and this is mortal disease. Ignoring this lack and the encounter of philosophers which took place a few days ago, a very interesting thing arose, which is our lack is often full of too many things. And so we need to get rid of this. we must get rid of all of this and accept it in order to be able to see this great richness, which is our lack, the lack of that presence which hides behind this lack and which reveals itself in this lack. Unfortunately, we're too attached to ourselves and to our material things. I'd like to conclude with a very brief quote, which is very important, because I wrote it down before Giovanna was sick, when we sent her a present for her birthday. And so, thinking of Christ Lewis, he writes in this text, and it represents the story of Giovanna. Imagine that you're in a house, a living house. So I am a living house, and God comes to rebuild it. At first, you understand what he's doing. He fixes pipes and the cracks in the ceiling and so on. And you're not surprised because these are regular things. But then he starts changing the house completely in an incomprehensible thing. What does he want to do? He's building a house which is totally different to what you had in mind. Opening the house, building towers, and so on. You were thinking of living in a house, but he's building a palace and he wants to go and live in there himself. Thank you.
Grazie Rodolfo, ci hai proprio aiutato a riportare.
Thank you, Rodolfo. You really helped us understand the fairy tale and its connection with this question we're asking ourselves at the meeting, and I believe those who have already read the book will want to read it again. In order to see that this promise will be kept, we have to see the results of this promise. We have to double check it, so to speak. A heart without pain is like suffering without revelation. Verifying this in my own experience, and I will refer to my experience with Giovanna, was also possible. I saw that the chair and the bed where she was lying are the core of the world, and that was the first place where I started praying for Syria some years ago. And the second thing I experienced, which Rodolfo was also referring to, is that once you have encountered Giovanna, when you leave her place, you don't know why, but you feel better because something is happening there. There's a presence in her home. The world might despise it, but it is still there. And this is what happens to us, what we feel in our hearts when we find something true, something which is hard to understand, but which fills the lack which we all feel. Now we can decide to accept it or to flee from this despair. We can choose to follow God, and this is what Giovanna represented in my life. She can be a better friend than many others because she is always saying yes every day. And what we are experiencing today can help us live our lives to the fullest, which is something we do not always do. So this is why we asked Ms. Spagnoli, who's the wife of Ugo Spagnoli, who's here with us to tell us about her experience. He's an ALS patient, and I would like to ask you, Silvia, to tell us something about your experience. Well, good morning to all of you. I'm not feeling very well, so I will not be able to speak very loudly. I would like to tell you, however, my experience and the experience of what Ugo and I went through, because I think my experience can help us understand what Paola was talking about. I am Ugo's wife. We met in 2003 and we got married in 2005. We were already quite old, and so we decided to get married right away. After 12 days after we had met, he proposed. He was always very determined. When I think about us, I think about all the gifts, all the grace which characterize my life in particular. I think I'm speaking for both of us, but I will tell you about my own experience after we met. Yesterday, I was thinking about the meaning of the word grace. What does grace mean? Grace is not something abstract. It is something which happens in the lives of every one of us and which transforms us forever. This is what grace is. There were some events and some people, some facts in our lives which gradually transformed it into a journey, which is a journey we all share. The first thing that comes to mind is linked with the period when we weren't married yet. And one night, Ugo was in China for work reasons, and so he called me during the night because that was the moment where we could actually speak. At the end of that phone call, I truly realized that God had created Ugo for me. It was as if God had created Ugo the day before just for me. Because everything in our relationship made me be true to myself. And it was a very hard experience because I always had to compare what I thought about myself and what he wanted to know. That is, he wanted to know who I really was. And so I had to work on myself, my self-awareness. And this was possible thanks to our relationship. This process developed over time. And this is what brought us a new grace, which was the grace of our marriage. On the day of our wedding, we were very sure that what we were doing was right, because for both of us, the fact that we had met meant that we had finally found the person who was made for us to accompany us during our present life. You know the words you say during the marriage, always being faithful to you in health and in sickness. When I said those words, I was extremely aware of what I was saying. And this was almost prophetical, I'd say. Because sometimes you say things that you do not wish for yourself. But when those difficult, terrible things happen, you realize that you cannot turn your back to the other person and you have to fulfill God's plan. What happened was almost prophetical. Those words were almost prophetical. I would like to show you some pictures so you can better understand our experience together. 1.5 years after our marriage, Riccardo was born. And that was another grace, because children are a true grace. And I could go on and on about this, but unfortunately, we do not have enough time left. After 1 year after Riccardo was born, in February 2009, Ugo started feeling not very well. He would lose his balance, he felt weak. And at first we explained this with what we were experiencing in that moment. It was a pretty stressful period. However, in June of 2008, Ugo was diagnosed, and we found out that those symptoms were the symptoms of a degenerative disease, which is called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And very quickly, because of this disease, Ugo was no longer able to walk, to move. In September 2009, Letizia was born, our second child. And I remember a very weird fact. After leaving the hospital, 3 days after I had given birth, Ugo was holding Letizia in his arms, and we were a bit far from the parking lot. And so I was pushing the carriage, the baby carriage, and it looked as if Ugo had given birth. On the 1st of November, Ugo was first admitted to the hospital for the first respiratory insufficiency. That was a very terrible moment for me. I think my mother is here, so she remembers about that moment. I had to go to the hospital and then give milk to Letizia and then go get Riccardo at school. So it was a very frenetic moment. Ugo came back from the hospital. He wasn't able to breathe any longer. He was in a wheelchair, and we had to hire a caregiver as well, because very often when a person is so seriously sick, you have to share your experience with people who you do not know. You have to forget about everything you thought was normal. And in order to survive, I truly needed that help. So this was a big change in our lives. However, that helped me understand that our life becomes true once we stop thinking that that life is only ours, our own. We opened our home to a number of people who decided to help us, almost in a mysterious way. We did not understand why all those people were helping us, but we were very grateful to them. And 6 years from that moment, those people are still there, and I'm very moved by what they're doing for us. I cannot explain it. I cannot explain why we have so many friends who manage to help us in so many different ways. Some people helped me at night. Some people helped me feed Ugo, because after he was hospitalized in 2010, he could no longer move his arms. So he was completely unable to move. So, I was taking care of my children and also giving food to Ugo, and many times I had to skip dinner because I basically had no time. So many friends helped us, and they organized a very special form of catering. They came in groups of 2 to 5 people. They prepared dinner. They set the table. They prepared the meals for the children. They helped me take care of Ugo as well. And so our home was no longer ours. We had just moved into that new home, and it was open to so many people. So that was a big change. But what I had experienced with Ugo at the beginning of our relationship helped me go through that very difficult moment. However, in September 2012, something very important happened. I remember that period very well, because in that period I felt as if life was overwhelming me, because I couldn't handle anything any longer. I had so many things to think about, and I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going crazy. And what happened? I called an old friend, a very close friend, and I asked him, please explain me why Jesus is not enough for me any longer. Jesus tells us that he will be with us until the end of time. But in that moment, I felt as if I had lost my faith. I told my friend, I cannot deal with my daily life, my daily experiences, which I haven't chosen. Someone else chose it for me. And if God loves me, I'm sure he cannot be asking all of this from me. And so I felt as if I had lost my faith. As Rodolfo was saying, facing this feeling of a lack makes us change. It changes our life completely. Everything became very, very difficult. However, I finally understood the meaning of everything that was happening to us. What we were going through changed our lives completely. Because I think completely putting ourselves in the hands of God is what really makes us live our lives to the fullest. I felt such a huge freedom. Some of my friends call me Wonder Woman, saying I am a Wonder Woman. However, this is not true. I am a completely normal person. However, I know that my life is in the hands of God. I cannot fully understand God's plan. However, over the past few years, we have seen so many beautiful things that happen to us despite this difficult situation, that I truly feel that we have changed and that this is a mystery. Of course, I do not know what will happen to us. It all depends on God's will, on His plan for us. Of course, my life wasn't easy. Just to give you an example, this morning I woke up at 6:45 to get here around 11, and I was still late because it takes us much more time to do normal things than it takes other people. And we experienced a true wonder over the past few years. For example, a friend of ours came to us, he met Ugo, and he told him, your friendship for me was fundamental for me to make a choice. And one of our friends told us he had finally proposed to his girlfriend because he told us, I have understood that it is possible to live together forever and to love a person forever because I have seen you. You are the example of this possibility. And so that's why I decide to completely trust God and to be at His service. And that's why at the end of May, we have celebrated 10 years of marriage. Here you can see some pictures of our daily life on the screen. You know, I have already said we have 2 children, but the relationship to their father is extremely spontaneous. It is completely normal. They play with him. And this picture represents this celebration which took place in May when we celebrated 10 years of marriage. Why did we do this? Because we wanted to say yes again to fate, which wanted us to be together. Ugo can speak through this very highly technological device, and so we managed to say yes again to renew our marriage promises and marriage vows. Sorry. I do not care whether Ugo is sick or not, because I only care about who he is, and I know he is in love with who I am. He is also very patient because, you know, it is not so easy to help people and to assist people in Ugo's situation, which is a very complicated situation to handle. And so when I asked him if he wanted to renew our marriage vows, he said yes. And so I realized that he still loved me. And for me, that moment was amazing. It was a truly beautiful moment.
E questa cosa qui ha portato ad una festa che non abbiamo organizzato.
And so we organized this celebration. Actually, our friends organized this celebration. There were 180 people there, probably more people than the people who attended our wedding 10 years ago. So I would like to come to the end of my speech. And I'd like to say that the love I feel for Ugo, which was renewed with this celebration in May, is something that I wish for all of you to experience in your lives without having to experience such a hard situation like ours. We are not special people. We are normal people. We are just saying yes to God's call. So I would like to invite you all to say yes every day. Because by saying yes, you can really follow your journey to sanctity and to salvation. So please pray for us so that grace will never abandon us, because grace is the only thing that can help us continue on this journey. There are so many people here, and I would like to all of you to pray for Ugo to finally be healthy again. And that's all. Thank you very much.
sembra che questo applauso esprima bene.
È difficile.
It is very difficult to take the floor after Hugo and Silvia's experience. I'd like to ask you to realize the reason why we arranged for this talk. Medicina and people, Associazione Medicina e Persona tries to maintain the relationship which must occur between caregiver and patient, because in this world it is difficult to live alone, and so this is why we need to support ourselves in order to build our life, taking into account that without such a important relation there is no adequate treatment. No treatment is enough. And this is what humanity and man needs. This is why we asked Giorgio Cerati, psychiatrist, to talk us about this. Thank you. After this testimony, it is difficult to take the floor, but I'd like to do so. I planned my speech around a few keywords which express the experiences that were shared and what we've done over the past years. First of all, does the experience of illness have something to do with experience of knowledge other than a feeling and a physical pain, which raises a problem of sense in the experience of the disease, which involves both the patient and the caregiver? We've talked about experience, so what does this mean? What characterizes an experience more than just acquiring information? It is an encounter, something new, something different, with which starts experience itself. And here we found the encounter with a suffering. And so, living through these diseases represents the encounter and the relationship of the person with its disease, with circumstances, relationships, needs, and limits related to this condition. On the other hand, the experience of our limits characterizes our human condition. Limit means a lack. The title of the meeting is very important. The lack we feel inside our heart. And I can say not only that I need something, but that I myself are a need. And this is reflected also in our language. We usually say, I am depressed, I feel anxiety. We do not say depression, for example, or those people who are diabetic or have a tumor. We talk about a diabetic patient or an oncological patient. And so the relationship between the person and the disease is very close. And so, taking into account the effectiveness of medicine and of treatment, the most important protagonist of the healthcare relationship is the individual. But what is the role of individuals and of the relationship among individuals in the treatment, and how much is it ignored in medicine? How important it is to take into account the individual, being attentive to their needs in order to embark on the right treatment in order to use the resources of patients and the potential of patients and to integrate them with the social network and their family. It is a real alliance. It is a therapeutical alliance, as we define it, which makes best use of its protagonists, the people, within their relationship, not being isolated within the families, which are deeply involved, active, even in original ways, as we have already listened in Giovanna's words. Even many associations of families which support and put forward initiatives for the Diversamente Association. So organized support is very important as well. And so, as we said, the individual, which reminds us of humanization, as we define it. Too often we say that we need to make more personal our clinics. Is it enough? Or do you think that we need a sort of humanism of treatment, as our bishops will say in Florence? Humanism of treatment, of care, means starting from restoring humanity in the experience of disease, starting from the questions that arise inside ourselves, asking ourselves what we're experiencing means, without censoring anything. On the other hand, how could we provide care without opening ourselves to the other, to their own questions about the meaning of all this? And for this reason, we also talk about the personalization of treatment, of care. We are talking about the present situation, not the future of research. Anyway, the experience of disease brings about a change in the person who experiences it. It is a real encounter which generates a new knowledge right now. And the word good is present in this, in the relationship between caregiver and patient. For example, Grumman, a few years ago, wrote the book Anatomy of Hope, where he analyzed the results of his patients in the relationship between analysis and treatment, analyzing human factors, extraclinical factors, but actually are a very important part of the clinical work. And so this is an analysis which goes on and which helps us improve and make progress in this direction. This kind of analysis is carried out by many experts, and Medicina in Persona supports these activities in order to discover the human elements in treatment and healthcare system. Many of our colleagues, lay colleagues or non-believers, remember what Benedict XVI called the hope that we feel in facing pain and suffering which we can relieve but not avoid, and that we have to treat. And so we talk about care, therapy, education, and the perspective and the desire of healing. These are very important topics, and we do not have time to analyze them, but they raise a question about the key word, which is the word change. And so we shall ask ourselves if it is okay to expect from treatment to make us just like we were before. It is a legitimate question, but an impossible question, especially in the degenerative diseases. We have to face reality. Time and reality are two fundamental concepts in this serious condition of pain and suffering. And so, as we've already said, and Silvia is here to say so, if on the one hand we have very serious symptoms, on the other hand, in this condition, we can create a space in order to open ourselves to the other, in order to understand ourselves in a deeper way, opening new horizons, unexpected horizons, and we create a new positive attitude which helps the patient to experience the disease, a change, a good thing, also within the family. But this positivity is also related to the relationship between the caregiver and the patient. And so we're talking about an encounter with the other, not only with the disease, the opportunity of an encounter between the patient and the caregivers. In other words, the experience of a shared experience. The self continuously rises from the encounter. We also talk about weakness, but this is a very strong statement. The other is continuously created inside us, and his revelation through the world and the relationship with the caregiver entails our own goal, our own realization. In difficult situations, only friendship can help us, namely when the other person exists, is present in us even more than ourselves. Another great doctor said, the problem, we are moved by the relation with the other. When you do something which is not expected of you, providing assistance means hospitality. The patient needs people moving with him, and he is moved by this. And so charity, which means a gift, not charity, but a gift which we all can provide, the gift of our time, being able to learn from the relationship with the other. As we used to say, my mentor said, the patient is our teacher. Gift represents the capability of reviving and restoring trust, and so the experience of change, the possibility of change, even for caregivers and healthcare workers, in order to maintain the motivation for our work and not to become chronicle, in order to improve our humanity together with our wisdom. Healthcare workers need to work in this direction towards therapeutical relationship. This is a very important aspect, so that our patient feels welcomed and taken care of and supported in his treatment. And so the relationship between patient and caregiver is a very important experience which can improve the clinic. And so we need to work hard to do so in order to develop an effective treatment and an authentic personal path of growth. And so we need to take into account our humanity in our clinic. We talk about hope, sharing things, feeling compassion, and relationship between patient and caregiver, and even the possibility of forgiveness, as our psychologists said in the 2 seminars they're organized this year. Because all of this is very important, because we all feel and experience disease as something unfair that happened to us, and so forgiveness as the possibility of recovery from disease and in the disease. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie Giorgio, perché credo...
Thank you, Giorgio. I truly believe what you said for doctors and caregivers is also true for husbands and wives and relatives in general, for all of us who have to help someone who is in need, for all caregivers. So I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Melazzini. He doesn't need any introduction because he has held very important roles. He's the director of the NeMo Clinical Center. He was also a city councillor. And from his commitment, centers were created in which patients are seen, first of all, as people. I believe we need more of these good examples. So thank you for publishing the book once again, and thank you for being here. The last word is never the word end, but the word good. What does this mean? It is just a matter of gazes, of what we really want to see or what we do not want to see. Especially this year, the topic of the meeting is very significant to me. And it really helped me think about my experience and understanding better my own experience of illness. If we read the title of the meeting once again, what is this lack of, or heart, of which of a sudden you are full? We can understand that in order for our hearts to become aware of this lack, which is something which has been explained very well in the past few days, we need a definite and definitive wound. And in my case, I'm talking about illness, experience of a disease. However, when we are faced with disease, with illness, the first thing we tend to do is looking back. And I also did this. I started thinking about all the things I wouldn't have been able to do any longer, about the things that I wouldn't have been able to reconcile with that new life, because the ideas I had about my life couldn't become true any longer. And so I almost started hoping that my experience would end very soon. This is not easy to say, and after what we heard from today's guests, I believe we have understood that it is quite hard to understand that what we are going through is actually a gift. At the beginning of my experience of illness, my spiritual father, Silvano Fausti, gave me 2 books as a gift. The book of Job and also a book by Father Giussani, The Religious Sense. And these Books really helped me a lot, and they still help me in my everyday experience. They help me grow, develop as a person, and become aware not to accept the limit which is due to my everyday experience of disease. In Job, we can read, I have found out about you because people were talking about you, but I now know you because I have encountered you and I have discovered that mystery which accompanies me and which existed before me. And I started asking myself questions, very important questions. What is life worth living for? What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of our existence? And whatever our philosophical, political, ideological position, whatever our ideals, I think we all ask ourselves those questions. I'm understanding this more and more in my life. All experiences, all situations prove that there is something for which life is worth living for. As Father Giussani used to say, that thing is that original sense, the original feeling of dependence, which is the evidence, the greatest, most important evidence for men of all times. And in a religious tradition, that something is God. So especially thanks to this new awareness and thanks to the fact that I see life as a mystery, I decided with the help of some people to embark on a journey of discovery of self-discovery through disease, through the experience of sickness, which led us to create the medical center NeMo. There's always something, a bad experience which happens to us in our everyday life, something which we had rather avoided, something which we were not asking for. However, those events make us understand ourselves better at a deeper level. And so we find ourselves faced with our true self, which is something that we hadn't been able to do before. And that is why I feel the happiness and I have this very deep trust and the desire of living life to the fullest every single day without denying, without neglecting and forgetting anything, however. Silvia said this as well, and something which is very important for me is what is very well expressed by Giussani. Father Giussani said that one of the most important words is I, the self. I am here today thanks to all of you, to my friends who help me experience disease every day as a great opportunity, as an added value. When reality becomes the self, reality becomes aware of itself. And this is the daily wonder I feel when I have to face the challenges of my life. And what is the result of all this? What I experienced creates a new gaze. When my wife woke up this morning, she said, "I'm so happy." And so, despite all difficulties, we can still be happy. We experience this every day, but it is actually a continuous process. Sometimes we have to wake up 3-4 hours before all other people to be able to come here and to get here on time. But the experience of the meeting makes us be grateful for everything that is happening to us. When you're affected by a very serious condition, whatever it is, especially very serious conditions, degenerative diseases, at first you think that it makes no sense, that it is impossible to reconcile disease and a sense of health. However, these diseases which have affected me and Ugo, and of which Silvia has made experience, these diseases torment our body, but they can also be a medicine for all those who are forced to live with it, and especially if we have no other choice. Disease can leave a permanent mark in our lives and in the lives of all the people who are around us, for the better or for the worse, for the caregivers, for the relatives. It is as if disease was building pillars of Hercules. Once we have gone beyond that point, there's no going back. And we realize that we can still look forward. We can go on, and that we can still do things which we thought we would never be able to do again. And if we think this way, if we start thinking this way, as Rodolfo was saying before, disease can become a form of health. Disease can be healthy because it makes us feel useful again, to ourselves first of all, but also to our relatives, to our friends. Disease can be positive because it helps us understand that in life we cannot and should not take anything for granted. Not even the fact that we can drink a glass of water without feeling like we're suffocating. Sometimes we are so focused on ourselves that we are not aware of the beauty of the people and the things and who surrounds us, who've been there for years, forever. And when that wound, disease more specifically, all of a sudden stops us, our values and our priorities change. Because our suffering, our pain, of course, are not something to wish for. But this does not mean that they're meaningless. As Giorgio was saying before, our commitment as doctors, as researchers, is extremely important because we have to do something to achieve a treatment, but first of all, to improve our quality of life, the quality of life of our patients. As doctors, healthcare workers, and researchers, we have a great luck. The fact that we can have a relationship with a human being, with a person who's suffering, but who can also teach us something. And that's why I say that a sick body can heal the soul, can make ourselves more determined, stronger, and more ready to fully commit to this new journey, to this new experience of life. Some time ago, I wrote that disease does not take away our feelings, our desires, and the possibility to understand that being is much more important than doing, as is proven by Silvia and Ugo and many others. It may seem like a paradox. However, a naked body which loses the ability of doing things and which is tormented by disease makes the soul shine, which is the place where we can find the keys which can open the door to a new path, to a new journey, which can help us fulfill our lives. To go back to the topic of the meeting, I started wondering and thinking about all the things I had done in the past. I started asking myself, what am I doing with this gift that was given to me? I am an oncologist, and after many years, I have started creating neurological centers for people who have neurological diseases. So this was a bit weird, and that's why I started asking myself some questions. Some years ago, the association Medicina e Persona was here at the meeting. What Father Giussani said about what is man for you is that man is the weakest, the man who's lying on the street. But the most important thing in people is freedom, the possibility to be free. And I realized I was not free. As Father Giussani said, the essence of the human self is freedom, which involves brain and heart, intelligence and will. And I would like to show you a short video now. It is about 2 minutes long. I think this can help us understand what I mean better.
Unable to heal. When you find out that you are sick, you think that your life is over. Instead, with a degenerative disease, you can keep on living. Surrendering is useless. For example, life is beautiful, not only in movies, but also in life. Unable to recover, there is the only thing that is unable to recover is my joy of life. It is useless to complain in these cases. Look for an umbrella.
Cercando di concludere rapidamente.
I will try and come to the end of my speech. So I would just like to highlight two important ideas: hope and gaze. Disease does not prevent you from hoping. Even if we are sick, we can have hope and we can be happy. I always say that hope is based on the encounter with another person who's hoping, where we can see the possibility to live and to be happy. As St. Augustine used to say, there is hope within each and every one of us, because hope and encounter are ways of curing ourselves. Giorgio used to say that truth is in the eye of the person who heals, but also Pope Francis talked about the gaze which gives myself dignity. Looking at other people gives back dignity. And so dignity is very important. And I believe the French saying is very true. We have to often cure, sometimes heal, but always comfort. And this hope was at the core of the experience of NeMo, which is present in Messina, in Rome, in Genoa, and in other cities. This experience shows how important it is to meet people and to share with people. Each and every one of us, despite our limits, has this huge opportunity. As Giovanna and Ugo show us, the last word is never the word end, but the word good, and our heart is full of it. We just have to be aware of it. I always say that we have to experience and to make best use of this opportunity. We have to use these moments not to be served, but to serve, to be at the service of other people with joy and love. We have to experience everything that happens to us as a gift, because it gives us hope. As Groupman used to say, hope comforts us, and it helps us see with the eye of the mind and of the heart to identify the journey which can help us lead a better life. St. Paul used to say, "Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what is the good, well-pleasing, and perfect will of God." I would like to thank Monica, who will help us continue together on this journey. But I would especially like to thank all patients, their relatives, Giovanna for the opportunity she gave us, Ugo, all healthcare workers for helping us, because they help me fill that lack that I feel in my heart, which makes my heart full, which is the energy which takes me through my daily life. And with hope, with determination, we can all prove this in our daily lives. Thank you.
Scusate.
Just a second to say a few words. First of all, for all of you who have not done it, in order to support the meeting, we need to raise funds and you can still donate in pavilion A1, A3, C5, and so you'll get the community card. It is a very important thing to do. Some people donate their life, but also if you donate just €1, it is a very important thing. I'd also like to give an applause and dedicate this applause to Giovanna, Hugo, and Mario. And we need to accept the challenge that they present to us and accept the challenge in our life, meaning that the last word is the word good. So let's dedicate the applause to them.